But you get overseas and you're flying. You start flying missions. You're doing mostly strike missions. Is that primarily what you're doing? Taking out targets in North Vietnam?
The F-4, of course, again, was configured and built from the keel up as an air-to-air combat machine. All right, the powers that be decided, hey, there's an airplane, we can hang a bomb on it. They put on an extra, I believe, 4 hard points on the bottom of this airplane, maybe 5, can't remember, so that we could carry bombs on this fighter airplane. Well, we were supposed to be, interceptors. We weren't supposed to be carrying bombs around, but we found out that sure enough, this big old airplane was a pretty good platform for dropping bombs. And so we could carry, 12, 13,000 pounds of bombs into the target, which was a pretty good load. We could also support, guys like you on the ground that with all kinds of various kinds of weaponry. And so what happened was we had a sister squadron on the aircraft carrier. So for a month line period, we would be fighters for 2 weeks, and then we would reconfigure our airplane to be bombers, and we'd be bombers for 2 weeks, and we would go back to fighters and then back to bombers. So to answer your question, half the time over there I was dropping bombs, and half the time I was doing the air-to-air mission.
And the air-to-air mission, primarily you'd be doing combat air patrols to support the other elements that were flying in with bombs, and you'd be protecting in case any MiG showed up.
Exactly, yeah. It was a CAP, a CAP, combat air patrol.
So you're pretty much almost done with deployment. We're talking you did what, 74 missions at this point? You've been there for 5 or coming up on 6 months. And on the 19th of May, 1967, you get a phone call and you guys get like a strike mission comes in that you are supposed to execute.
It was a big deal, and it was called an Alpha Strike. An Alpha Strike was the top priority, and we knew that there would be a lot of airplanes in the air, and we'd have some pretty important targets to hit. And it was sanctioned straight from the Pentagon. It was JCS stuff, which of course was one of the problems in that war, was that most of our instruction came from the guys back in the Puzzle Palace, and they wouldn't let us decide targets or altitudes or anything else. It was pretty well planned by the time we got the go. And I got a call, I suppose 3 a.m, something like that, saying that I was to schedule this flight. I was a schedules officer for the squadron, and so I was the guy that figured out who went on what strikes and who went with whom and the airplanes that they had. And so I got up early to start planning this strike with the airplanes and the pilots and the backseaters, our radar intercept officers, our co-pilots. And so I did. Then we went to the briefing room and got about an hour brief on these targets. I later found out that the reason for the whole thing, the reason why we were doing an Alpha Strike on the 19th of May, was it was the birthday of their president, Ho Chi Minh. And again,
happy birthday, Ho Chi Minh.
Yeah, exactly. The brilliance of our Psy-War greats was that we would catch them in celebration of the big day, because it was like our President's Day. Right. They had picnics and that kind of stuff, and so we were going to catch them with their pants down. Well, as most things that happened in Vietnam, they knew we were coming for whatever reason, and that day there were 8 F-4 Phantoms shot down. But I'll never forget the beginning of it, because I took off and I rendezvoused with a tanker and took on an extra 3,000 pounds of fuel, and then joined the squadron. And it was, in fact, a CAP mission. It was a combat air patrol. I was not carrying bombs. So we had 4 of us on one side of the strike group and 4 of the other. And just to look, because it was 3 aircraft carriers and 5 Air Force bases we were just throwing everything we had at the enemy that day. It was an amazing armada, and I could see from one horizon to the other these airplanes, and I remember feeling really proud, man, just to be a part of this, doing something that very few people in the world would ever do, and flying this airplane at age 24, and so that was how it all began on the 19th of May.
One of the things that we were talking about just before we hit record was the kind of the sense of humor that you have in the military and what that's like. And by the way, I haven't even mentioned that, referring to a book that you wrote called I'm No Hero by Charlie Plumb. And that's available on Amazon. You can get it it'll be a link on the website, but awesome book.
Actually better on my website because I sign everyone that goes out. So my website, charlieplumb.com.
Okay.
So.
Well, there you go. Even better. Going to the book here, you guys are before you launch, you're getting ready to launch, kind of getting ready for the briefing, and here we go. The pilots of the fighter planes gathered in their own briefing room and read from a television screen and teletype the weather information and the position of the ship. We reviewed once again the switches we would have to throw, and I coordinated with the maintenance officer the weapons we would need, the volume of the fuel, etc. Serious thoughts were in the back of all our minds, but outwardly, our mood was light. We laughed and joked, drank coffee, and smoked. My regular Rio, which is the radar intercept officer, is the backseater because the F-4 Phantom has two people, was up to his old habit of manipulating his slide rule. Being a self-styled math wizard, he again pinpointed his likelihood of getting bagged or shot down. This was based on some speculative formula he had found somewhere. Today, friends, he proclaimed, my bag factor is 0.019376. And then you replied to him, then save me a room at the Hanoi Hilton. Again, I'm glad you're still laughing about that, sir. And the rest of you, as we go through this book, will see the true irony in that joke. Back to the book here. We left our ready room and entered the central briefing room where all the pilots, Rios, and standby crews scrutinized their master plan, which included maps and photographs of the targets and intelligence reports of enemies' fire capability. After our central briefing, we returned to our ready room, meditated last-minute instructions, and put on our flight gear. Altogether, these briefings took as long and sometimes longer than the mission itself. I looked up at the screen. Pilots, man your aircraft. We slapped each other on the back, exchanged a customary give 'em hell dialogue, and patted the posterior of our good luck girl hanging on the door. It was time to go topside. You guys are now getting ready to take off. And again, just some of this humor. Back to the book. Engine run-up is good. Takeoff checklist is complete. I'm ready to go. Gary, you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, I mocked. This is your captain speaking. Welcome to Flight 403 to Hanoi, North Vietnam. We'll be flying at an altitude of 11 grand, and we have a high ceiling. Make sure your seatbelt is fastened. No smoking, please. So that's the attitude going out. And legitimately, this is your 75th mission. You've flown 74. You're feeling pretty comfortable. I mean, even though, of course, you got thoughts in the back of your mind, but you're feeling pretty comfortable about how you do your job and what you get done.
I am feeling bulletproof.
I wasn't going to go that far, but let's just go there because I know that feeling too.
Yep.
As you push in, back to the book, all this coordination. So it's what you just talked about, this massive effort going forward, dozens and dozens of aircraft. All of this coordination of men and machinery during the refueling was done in complete silence. We called it zip lip. Although enemy radar would have already detected us, we were careful not to give radio spooks any additional information. It was gratifying to experience such close rapport with my air wing. I knew and they knew what each was doing in this intricate maneuver, yet not a word had to be spoken. And I've actually talked about that on here. When we would train, and when I was running training for the SEALs, I would tell them, hey, you're not allowed to talk during this training mission. You can't say one word to each other. And it was amazing after you do that a couple times how much better people get because they're reading, they're reacting, they're anticipating what other people are going to do. And you guys are just so far ahead at this point 5.5 months into deployment, it's you guys are doing this whole thing without saying a word to each other.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the incredible things about the military is even though you're just a little piece of that big machine, this big powerful machine, it's pretty awesome to experience when that stuff's going on. And you kind of talked about what you were doing. You were positioned on the flanks, anticipating MiGs. How often are you guys seeing MiGs over there?
Not often. I had seen MiGs probably 4 or 5 times up to that point, and so they really were really good about not showing up until they knew that they could kill something. You know, of course they had the advantage. They had the home field advantage, and so they could wait on their bases until we came to them, and then they would launch. So if you didn't get close to a MiG base, you probably weren't going to see one. Mm-hmm. They had a very short range, and they didn't stay in the air very long, and so we didn't see them very often.
And on this one, you get a call though. You hear that they gave you a call for there's MiGs. What is it? MiGs at 20 west. And you start to get a little aggressive, start leading out that way a little bit, right?
Yep.
And the flight commander tightened you up and said, "Hey, Plumb, get back over in formation."
Yep. Well, you know, my best buddy there, Denny Wisely, had already shot down 2 airplanes by that time, and he shot down another one after I was shot down, and so. And you know, I mean, that's what every fighter pilot wants to have a MiG to his credit. And I saw this opportunity, with 5 days to go. This is my day. This is Charlie Plumb day. So I started to ease out of the squadron so that I would be the first to go after this MiG. And
Charlie Plumb's going to get his.
That's what happens. But no, that's how it began.
And they tightened you back up, so you fall back into formation, and now there's a SAM. Is there a SAM call? Did you pick it up on the Fuzzbuster?
I did, but there were a lot of them in the air, and so that thing was warbling all the time. They were salvoing their SAMs that day. They just shoot a bunch of them off at the same time, and so every time they shot one off, and every time their radar would scan me, I would get the Fuzzbuster. But we also had, the big radar airplanes in the sky at the same time, and they would call us, and that's how I got that call, that 20-mile away call. Was from our electronic folks that were flying well above us with the radar.